I'm talking about Vienna because Vienna, for me, is the prime example of gender mainstreaming and a gender-sensitive city in Europe, if not in the world. And you will find that in UN documents that Vienna is cited as a good example. And I think it's one of the reasons why that Vienna is regarded or is consistently voted as one of the top most livable cities in the world. As an EU, a part of an EU member state, all EU member states, including us until March next year, or depending on what happens, or tomorrow, we are required to adopt gender mainstreaming in our public policies and our public services. And as Katja has just explained, this was incorporated into the Equalities Act. But Vienna has been taking gender mainstreaming very seriously for the last 20 to 30 years. And I've been very fortunate and privileged to be in an academic study network, or two in fact, in which Eva Kale, who was one of the principal, if you like, champions of gender mainstreaming in urban design, architecture, planning, highway engineering in Vienna. And so have heard her talk and collaborate and, as I say, explain how this was done. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with the idea of gender mainstreaming, and I was very put off from it for a very long time because it seemed to me to be very much about the technical, rather procedural, maybe rather boring and dull set of ideas about how to incorporate gender equality into our practice. But the example of Vienna is very, very convincing in the way that these procedures and practices have resulted in some very tangible results, as I say, in one of the most livable cities in Europe, in the European continent. So this is an example of the process of gender mainstreaming, which is meant to be cyclical, and Vienna regards it as cyclical. This is a more academic take on it by one of the members of our Gender STE network, Doris Damjanovic, and here she is showing that in gender mainstreaming, we think through the theory of gender inequalities. Why are there differences? It regards the evaluation of how we are behaving at the moment. Where is inequality or discrimination existing? Then looking very critically, they talk about planning models, but it might be at examples of practice of the way we do things. Also looking at our values, which, as Katja has just mentioned, what are we really valuing in our objectives for a scheme or a proposal? Then taking that into practice, and then evaluation of the practice and the outcomes themselves, and then feeding back, all with participation and consultation. And what's interesting about Doris's diagram is she also talks about the importance of the symbolic dimension and the imaginative dimension, because one of the complications of gender mainstreaming is thinking, what if we valued male-female activities equally? How would the world be? How is it different? We need this kind of imaginative leap. So how can we do it? And one of the things that Eva Kale says is that in her work within Vienna City Council, one of the big challenges is how to put across to other officers who are saying, well, you know, what do you want me to do? You talk in these sort of abstract terms. And she always says, it's like chopping wood. We need something, you know, very concrete, very exact, to explain exactly how we are going to proceed. And in Vienna, this started off as early as 1992, when they had a women's office set up within the authority, and then they had a special office, this very long title, the Special Office for the Coordination for the Needs of Women in Planning and Construction, and it went for 20 years. And what they did was to run over 60 pilot projects. At that time, there were very much fewer women winning competitions for architecture and master planning exercises, so positive discrimination, also transport and movement plans. They have done a lot of work on open space, on parks and park design, district plans, design guidance, and also procedural guidance. And this is a slide showing some of the key principles that are taken into the strategic level of planning. And I've chosen to show this because I know Claire and Noah are going to talk more about public space. But one of the key principles that comes up in gender mainstreaming is about planning and designing for the requirements of everyday life, and also for the unpaid work, which principally has fallen on the shoulders of women, but more and more men are now taking this on, about caring duties, about making sure that resources, space, time is valued equally between the sexes, and that rolls on to different aspects of the built environment. Housing is obviously very important, governance, and the idea of the polycentric urban structure, a city of short distances, is one of the key principles in Viennese strategic planning. A high quality of public space in terms of safety, and that leads on to an environmentally friendly public transport system, a safe city for all, and this very detailed attention to the requirements of daily life, including in sort of highfalutin terms, we call the reproduction as well as the production, those caring duties. And after the Special Coordination Office was dissolved, and the idea that gender mainstreaming was then to flow through all the different departments in Vienna, I can remember meeting Ava, and she was a bit depressed and saying, maybe it won't happen. Maybe all this 20 years of work will get forgotten. But it hasn't been. And one of the tools that they used was commissioning some work from Doris and two other authors, and they looked through all the standards and practices that were then being used within the Viennese City Council and pulled out those that were particularly relevant for gender mainstreaming, as well as developing others. And so this document is actually available on the web. It's available in English, so you can download it. And it explains the basic principles, the objectives, and it explains how to implement gender mainstreaming throughout practice. So it provides a detailed set of guidance with diagrams, tables, design guidance, and other criteria. And it was also based on some of the pilot projects. Now, some of these are well known. I just thought I'd show one or, two of them. One has been constructed for over 20 years. The Frauenwerkstatt, which was one of the early schemes, which was for an all-women competition. It's primarily residential, but with some mixed use. And I think if you go to Vienna, it's actually very worthwhile looking at it, because it's actually weathered very well over its 20-year life. It has the principles of what we would consider to be good urban design, addressing the main street. I think Sebastian always talks in the lecture on Vienna about how you come out of the metro station and you see the building addressing the road and the mixed use there. Also, there's a police station at the corner of it, and then this very subtle route joining up two roads in the quarter, and the arrangement of public and private spaces that Francisco Ullmann, who produced the master plan for it, creates a lovely sequence of semi-private spaces that are now very well used, as well as public spaces, and it feels extremely safe walking through it. And this kind of detailed attention has been followed through by the authority in parks. They've actually funded and resourced the type of information that you need to make good design. Making social surveys and taking on board things like sexual harassment. These are some of the indicators they produced. And to conclude, this whole approach towards gender mainstreaming is being taken into a new urban extension, Aspern-Seestadt, which is, Sebastian mentioned briefly in his talk, complete new brownfield development on a disused airfield. As you can see, it's a very major development. Gender mainstreaming is on the flyer for the development. The public spaces are being have the guidelines produced by Jan Gale. The master plan was won by Tovat and Partners. There's a very high level of social and commercial infrastructure in it, and they've really taken building a chunk of city very seriously. So there's 20,000 jobs going in there, a real mixed use. The process had gender experts involved at different phases, from the strategic planning down to the competitions for each parcel of land. So these voices and learning was carried through. And also in the alterations to the master plan, and in a special study that was produced to go alongside the development. And, you know, the results are quite varied. There are different plots and housing. The public spaces are very impressive. And to finish at the symbolic level, which I mentioned at the beginning, one of the, there were two CEOs for the development, one female, one male. And one thing the woman CEO did before she stepped down was to make sure that some of the streets are named after famous women from Vienna and from Viennese society as well as elsewhere. So we have Hannah Arendt, and famous Austrian woman philosopher, and Janis Joplin, but there are other ones less well known. So I really commend Vienna to you as a prime example of gender mainstreaming, seeing how it works. And here are some references for anybody who would like to follow it up. Sebastian Lowe's Urban Nous lecture gives a very good background. And for those of you who've been, you know, you can discuss what would be the barrier to doing this in London, particularly. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.